Good afternoon and welcome to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. Tonya Esquibel here every Saturday from noon to 1. In studio with me is my co-host, Kim Hollingshead with Hollingshead and Associates. And I'm super excited. It's always fun when Kim brings on a guest and I'm like, I don't know if I know that guest or not. And then like before we go on the air, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I do know him. He's awesome.
Everybody knows him.
He does. So Kyle Feltz is going to be on our show today, and he is the owner of Bradford Real Estate and lots of other entrepreneurial companies too. So I appreciate you taking your time. Our passion has always been about educating people with real estate. And there's so many, different areas of real estate. It can come from who's your real estate agent, who's going to do your inspection, who's going to do your mortgage, who's going to do your title work, who's going to, do those repairs if it needs to be done once you own a home. So I know that you have an extensive knowledge of that. So I appreciate you taking your time coming on the show today very much. And so looking forward to getting to know your story. But if you're just tuning in for the first time, we're here every Saturday from noon to 1, the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. You can always call us off the air at 615-300-0794, 615-300-0794 to get any type of information that is all areas of real estate, whether, again, is it who's your mortgage officer, who is your real estate agent, who's your title company, what about a builder if you want to build a new home, or how to identify who's the best builder in, that has homes ready right now in inventory. So we've got some wonderful promotions that we're running with some of our builders that have inventory right now. And average interest rates, if you look at it, depending on, there's so many factors, there's a lot of changes that came into the market depending on the loan program. But let's just say for perspective today, you're looking at an average of 6.5%. Some of our builders are actually offering 4.99%. Some are even 4.75. That is not an ARM. That's not a buy down. That's a 30-year fix. So there's some great opportunities with home ownership that are out there that literally was not out there a year and a half ago. So now is the time to buy. A lot of people think, well, rates are rising, I should sit on the fence. But now is the time you're going to get some really great negotiations. You're not having to be in a market where you're asking $20,000 or $30,000 over asking price, and you're having builder incentives that not only let you do a rate buy down, but also could be some great incentives toward an upgrade. It could be incentives toward closing cost and prepaids in addition to the rate buy down. So give us a call, your local team, 615-300-0794, 615-300-0794. Okay, Kim. So you were telling me a little bit about your guys' history.
Yes.
And I want you to introduce Kyle because my story was limited. I got to go to his wonderful office years ago, but I never got to meet, the face behind the name of the company, but heard such great things from his agents when I was doing a short training there. So introduce him, your guys' connection. And then Kyle, can't wait to hear your story and your journey too, as we do the show together.
Yeah. Thank you. I am so thrilled to have Kyle on the show. So Kyle and I have a lot of mutual friends from college. He started at Lipscomb playing baseball and then ended his college baseball career with Trevecca, which we know you are also Trevecca grad.
Alumni.
Yes. Yeah. So we all kind of share this college thing. And after college, we just both connected in real estate and have just maintained a friendship really over the last few years. Yeah. And I'm just so impressed by everything that Kyle does. The number one thing that I hear when his name comes up and is mentioned, and I told him this yesterday, is that everyone says he's so positive. He's so fun. He's so good with people. And everybody who works for him absolutely loves working for him. Like that is an across the board opinion of Kyle. So I'm excited. At some point during the show, I hope you share a little bit about your positive mindset and how you do maintain that, even though you run, 8 companies?
That's someone asked me that the other day. They said, how many LLCs? And I said, let me check with my CPA. And it's typically they have all just come out of natural relationships that I just ended up partnering with some really great people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is great. And so he's the owner of Bradford Real Estate, Cobalt Construction, a heating and plumbing company. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So, and property management, right?
Yes. That was our second, kind of a sister company. Mm-hmm. And it was because I was getting kind of in trouble with our investors because I would refer them to people. And it didn't typically go very well. And I was like, there's a real need for property management. So in 2015, we go to our first property management conference, me and a guy named Trevor Garrett, CPA, like we think totally differently. And he's my partner in every business now. And we tell this room of people at a property management conference that we're not going to take checks. And you thought it was the craziest.
It was back in 2015.
Yeah.
There's no Venmo.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we were like, when we lease a property, we're not going to take checks because that was the complaint. The checks in the mail, and then they don't get the payment. So it's now very common that the property managers do that. So,
Yes.
But back in 2015, it was like.
So what was their options for them to pay at that point? Was it just like a certified cashier's check?
I think it was an ACH.
Okay, ACH.
And, I was not in the weeds as much with property management, but I do think on the lease, it basically said, if all you have is the ability to write a check, this may not be the property for you. And it was really what we're doing is we really want the tenants to be happy, but really we got to look out for the actual owner.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you guys handle COVID? Because I know that there were a lot of tenants who were not paying rent in COVID. As a property manager, what did you guys do?
That was one of the scariest days of my life. And it was mid-March, and we're kind of sitting, on opposite sides of the room. We didn't even know if we were supposed to be in person with each other. But I'm talking to Trevor and Eric Jones, who was our general manager, and we just kind of were saying, like, what happens if, at the time, I think we had about 600 properties. I said, what happens if 600 people don't pay their rent?
Wow.
And very stressful. And so, because it's stressful not only for the tenant, they got to have a roof over their head, but for an owner who probably has a mortgage to make a payment on. So, did a lot of extended payment options. So weekly, bi-weekly, a typical month rent may turn into a 6 or 7 week situation, just kind of, and we were very flexible, and the owners were too, and the tenants were. So it was a very fluid time, but we were able to get through it very, very, we're very fortunate. Very few evictions. So.
Wow, that's awesome. So the tenants were able to pay, some people, they just had enough to get by week by week by week.
Yep.
At that point.
Correct. Yep.
I mean, it's hard to imagine. We forget. I mean, it's just been just a couple of years now, and we already forget how challenging that time was.
It really was. Yeah, and you really want to take care of the owner, but you really want to take care of the tenant too. I mean, if you think about it, we did have a lot of tenants in the hospitality industry that for everybody, like all of a sudden it's someone that was making really good money just doesn't have a job, or at least it's shut down for the next foreseeable few months.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. So segging into that, I know we got to take a break pretty quickly, but I would be curious to hear your, so you still manage around 600 homes, property management?
I think we're probably around 700, and it's
700.
It is a different, we do not do HOAs. So that is all single family and
single family. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I would be curious, of how it's affected you with inflation being a 40-year high, because
Absolutely.
Some people are living paycheck to paycheck as well. And how is that affecting your tenants? Are you seeing kind of the same thing with COVID and having to negotiate, or do you feel that it's just a different stage?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the good news is that Middle Tennessee is just obviously a really strong market, but yeah, I would definitely say that as far as like leasing properties, it is taking longer. Mm-hmm. And it's because a lot of those $1,500, $1,600 a month are now $2,400 and $2,500 a month. So it's really affected everybody, but it can be a good thing. Like if you're an owner that bought back in 2015 and the numbers worked at $1,500 a month, but now you're getting $2,400. That's a good thing.
They're very happy.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, you're right. I mean, affordability is, we could go down a whole, another road with that.
I think we might.
Okay.
Because that is a big deal right now,
big deal.
especially with Nashville having a council race and also a new mayor coming in. And that is one of the hot topics. And so I'd love to talk about that during the show. But right now we're going to take a break. You're listening to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. Stay tuned. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. With me is my co-host Kim Hollingshead with Hollingshead & Associate, and we have Kyle Feltz here with Bradford Real Estate Group. And if you're just now tuning in, we were talking a little bit about all the different businesses that he has. And if you'd like to get some more information, property management was one that we just talked about, also owning a real estate company. So you're right there on the heart of home ownership and how to navigate, negotiate these different markets and teach your agents how to do that. So you can always give us a call off the air at 615-300-0794. If you're just now tuning in for the first time, you can also listen to us on podcast. Also, we have Spotify, Apple Podcast, our social media, our reels. So go check it out. Our biggest passion is to bring education to this platform. I mean, real estate, I've always believed, is one of the biggest ways to build wealth. And we love having guests like Kyle on to kind of give us a different perspective in what you're seeing on the market. And one of the things that we were talking about before the break is affordability. And affordability is something that I think is on, we go through the ballot this year. You've got the mayors that are running, you've got new council seats that are opening up because we have incumbents that are coming out. And so what does that look like? It's a big race for Metro Nashville, I feel like. And on all the balance is, transportation, affordability. Some have education on there, also first responders. So there's a lot of things that Nashville has grown so fast. Is it sustainable growth? How do we grow at a better pace? How do we make sure our first responders are taken care of? I mean, I know living down here has changed my passion. And the reason I'm running for councilwoman is just because when I lived in Brentwood, Franklin, I never really got involved. And living downtown just shows you the dynamics of what's happening, and also, getting people involved to have a voice to make sure that we keep our communities first. And affordability, just from being in the mortgage lending industry for 28 years, you're in real estate, Kim does residential closings. To me, that's top of the list. But how do we fix that problem? And that is where everyone has a different opinion, but it seems to just get bottlenecked and nothing ever happens. So I'm hoping with this new election, having a new mayor, fresh face, having a lot of new council men and women will basically maybe strategically come together and figure out how to do more home affordability. I've got my opinion about how to fix it, but I want to hear your opinion because you're our guest today. And so you see a lot of things and help a lot of clients and developers and builders.
Yeah. So it's a great question. So the Business Journal actually interviewed us about this about a year ago. And unfortunately our answer was, a perfect example, we have a 15 unit development in Old Hickory, totally set up to be a 350 to 450 scenario, right? And so it took about a year and a half longer than it should. Therefore, the interest went up. Therefore, it became a 5 to 550 development. So efficiency is probably the biggest thing that's keeping developers from being able to actually create affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, that is something that can only get fixed through just what you're talking about, and that would be different or newer people in positions to help make it more efficient.
So what caused that delay, that year and a half delay? Was it planning?
A lot of different things. So it's not like it was, and it's one of the things. Yes, and one of the things we love to do is we have a lot of people that say, I want to get involved in real estate. But I just kind of want to give you some money and you just make stuff happen, right? So just all of us are. So if you have a pool of investors, and everything is dialed in and it's on let's say a 18-month time frame, whatever, you name it. But then if 18 months turns into 30 months and then 34 months, the whole affordability aspect is basically, it's gone. So, yeah.
I think so a consumer, I think a myth is, the builders and developers are just making all this money. But in actuality, the builder and developer are carrying the interest on that land longer than they've ever carried it before.
Yep.
We have a bottleneck with codes and planning commission to get things passed through. They're shorthanded. They have been for years.
Yeah.
That's not been corrected by any of the previous mayors. And so therefore, because of those delays, not only does the builder have more costs, but they're also passing more impact fees, more stormwater fees. And so the developer and builder, I've been doing this for 28 years, has incurred more cost and more time delays than they ever have. But when you hear the other side of the voice of, oh, we want affordability, but there's nothing being done to pass the affordability. It's just a lot of legislation and a lot more fees and a lot more delays. And then now on top of that, we have 40-year inflation and also interest rates, the highest that they've been in years. And so therefore that consumer, even though the developer intentionally bought that project maybe 2 years ago to come out 350, 450 is now at 550, 650. What consumer can afford 550, 650 with interest rates being, going from 2 3/4 to, we said for on average 6.5%. You might can get in the fives depending on what loan program you qualify for, but that's a big difference in their payment too.
Absolutely.
And so therefore we continue to talk about the problem, but I feel like the root of the problem is going to have to be in staffing codes to be able to give quicker turn times, better processes and systems in place, and also with planning commission. It's got to be able to have a fast track program. And what I mean with that is, and I've been involved in the home builders for a really long time, president of several chapters, the current president of the Metro Nashville chapter. But what I hear constantly in some of those board of directors meetings is if you have a builder that comes in that has been building in Davidson County for years, that really knows their process, has no issues, they should be fast tracked. If you have, say Tonya Esquibel is going to come out and build her first home, yes, let's maybe do a little bit more due diligence, especially if it's going to be special zoning and making sure that the quality is there. And I feel like that is where the really good, reputable builders are getting bottlenecked and they're getting good deals on prices, but 2 and 3 years later, trying to get it up and off the ground. And then you have supply cost issues with COVID on top of that, that put us behind, that just kept pushing those prices higher. So I think if we just had a better streamlined process, make sure that they get the staff and codes that they need. Planning commission, I've been talking to, we had a meeting for Metro that actually Kim, you sponsored. And one of the gentlemen was there that just talked about with planning commission, like it's just sometimes they just check a box and push it back to that builder and developer versus just maybe taking a 5-minute conversation instead of making them go through the entire process. And most of those builders had the documents there, but that person did not have the experience to even go through and realize that the exhibits were there. And so they pushed it back and had to start all over again. Yes. So those are things that I feel like that's just minutia that's going on in Metro that is really hurting our affordability on top of things beyond our control, which is inflation and obviously the interest rates rising. But if we could keep our costs down, be able to develop and build sooner, that would definitely save money on those units.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the key is the more efficiently they can be built in the process. I mean, it's not like the builders and developers, most of them, and the ones that I'm sure we all work with, they're not bad humans. And they have just a normal profit margin that changes based on the fact that they just had to carry the interest for an extra 12, 15 months.
Right.
So, yeah.
Or the cost of land has gone up. Just the acquisition price for a parcel of land has increased because there's just such a shortage. And now what they're doing is I'm finding developers are trying to find parcels that are grandfathered in. I mean, property that's already got an SP on it that has had one for years, and they're just scouring the records trying to find something because they want to avoid that 24-month long, zoning and entitlement process. And it is very expensive. It costs. There's a huge investment on the front end. We're talking well over 6 figures many times just to get something zoned and entitled. And so that plus the price of the land, I mean, there's a reason why it's very risky as well, right? Development can be because, sure, you may have a piece of land that's zoned for 200 units, but once you get in and you run your your plans and you run everything through planning, those 200 units just fell down to 150 units. That happens all the time. Just because you can get a zoning for a certain number doesn't mean you're going to be able to build that certain number, right? But all the projections and the financing and everything was built on 200 units. So guess what? When you don't get 200 units now, you're only getting 150. The price of each unit goes up.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes back to just reminding me, I know a developer, an investor that own a piece of land, they're trying to do affordability in a certain district area, and they can't even get the council person to call them back. And they're not trying to do, increase a lot of density. They're trying to make it more community feel, to have a dog park, and just really the way that they have the land, those units, those single family or townhomes, whatever that developer's trying to do, would be affordable, like we're talking about. So not only did we talk about, are you bottlenecked with certain things outside of our control, but then also that goes back to how important this local vote is and how important it is to step up and vote. It was really interesting to me. Roy Dell has taught me so much in a short period of time. Yes. I've heard his name forever. And Kim actually introduced us, so I got to know him. And out of like 37,000 people in a district, looking at the District 17 that I'm in, there's literally maybe 2,000 people that vote.
Right. Yeah.
We've got to get out and vote.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times I will take that in my past. My daughter used to tell me, Mom, you got to vote local. And I was always trained to be more focused on the national elections, the president, Senate, House of Representatives. But local is so important because that is your everyday life. And I think that a lot of people maybe had that misconception as me for many, many years. But as we're starting to see Nashville grow so much, I think it's more important than ever to step in. And there is some affordability projects that are out there, but then again, it goes back to getting the council person to agree, to even have a conversation about it, to not even return a phone call. That's challenging all in its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we got to take a break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome back to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. I'm Tonya Esquibel here every Saturday from noon to 1, the original real estate show right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can call our local team, 615-300-0794, 615-300-0794. In studio with me is my co-host, Kim Hollingshead with Hollingshead Associates, and we have Kyle Felton with Bradford Real Estate Group and many other, I think 7 or 8 companies, property management. Yes, I don't even remember them all, but I don't know how you juggle it all, but that's amazing. I'm so glad that you took your time to come onto the show today to talk to our listeners, educate our listeners. Our demographic, we usually have anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 people tuning in and out. And if they miss us, they can always catch us on the podcast too, and also YouTube. So we've put it out there on a lot of social media channels. Thanks to Dylan, which is with Uplift Media, that's helping us take this to the next level to continue to provide education for everyone. So again, the number is 615-300-0794. If you have any questions off the air, we'll be happy to help you. But if you're tuning in or coming back into the show with us, we were talking about just how this is such a big year when it comes to Metro Nashville and Davidson County. We have, a mayor race that's going on, all new council people, as far as some are rerunning. A lot of incumbents are coming out. So you've got new people that have the opportunity to not run against an incumbent. We've talked about affordability as being a really big challenge. And we talked about, probably a lot of that has to do with the delays in codes, in planning commission, also, outside factors that affect us too. But there is a lot of internal things that we could do as a city if we have a good council that comes together and really focuses on affordability. And we were mentioning that, there's several developers and builders that I know that have projects that would be affordability and not just huge density, but nice projects, giving good sidewalks, giving a dog park and making it look really family neighborhood oriented. And sometimes they're challenged to even get a phone call. After a year later, they still cannot get a phone call. And so those are things that I really want our listeners to know. If you are in Davidson County, find out what district that you're in, make sure that you find a candidate, support a candidate, and please go out and vote for a mayor. Do your research, do your homework, and make sure that we come together, because Nashville is, it's one of the top cities in the nation right now. I think the last I heard, it was in the top 25. It could have moved, into the top 10. I'm not for sure of that yet, but we have a lot of growth. Some people are for growth. Some people aren't for growth, but there's a way to grow sustainable if we work together in community and we elect the right officials coming into, serving us the next 4 years. So, Kyle, I don't know if you have any closing remarks on that, because I know you work with a lot of real estate and developers, but I know if they were just tuning in, I wanted to kind of recap them on what we were talking about, how important this election is this year to Nashville.
You're absolutely right. So, excuse me. I grew up here, and I grew up in Bellevue, and went to school at Lipscomb. So, the changes that have happened. So, I got into real estate in 2003. So just to think about over the last 20 years, I mean, the changes that have occurred, I actually think we have done a really good job. So going back to, it's really been more of a problem over the last 3 years with getting projects done, right? So I do think that there's a lot of things that Nashville has done right. So to your point, though, this next election is when it's time for a change. And what we talked about is if we want to get back to having some affordability, we're going to have to get more efficient in that process. So
absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah. So if you would, if anyone out there is not aware that a race is happening, please go to nashville.gov. Actually, the actual voting date is August 3rd, but I encourage everyone to go out and do early voting too. Find your candidate, find out what district that you're in, research your mayors, find out which one that you feel that can best represent our city. So we're going to segue into real estate now, owning Bradford Real Estate Group. Tell us a little bit about how that started and how you fell into real estate. Because I always say, all right, I didn't go to school to be a loan officer. It's not on our checklist of degree options, right? Or correct. To be a realtor. I mean, of course, a business, small businesses and financial management. But yeah, how did you fall into that? We all have our stories.
Yeah, sure. So, just growing up, always kind of assumed I would play professional baseball.
So right there, what position were you?
So I was a center fielder and a pitcher, outfield pitcher, and then had a real bad ankle break my senior year of college, of high school. So when I entered college, I was what the coach referred to as the most expensive one-tool player he had ever had. I literally just DH'd. In college. All I did was hit. I say all that to say I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went ahead and got my license kind of at the end of my college career.
Was it in your family background? Or?
Not really. My dad had his license, but he's a civil engineer. He never did anything with it. But it was interesting that he did have that. And so then a guy named Pat Wagner, who is a mentor of mine, kind of just said, look, I think, because I was going to go to law school, and he was like, I think for your personality, you'd be a terrible attorney, but really good at real estate. So here we are. Yeah, that's right.
He really did.
He nailed it. So, so then for 3 years, got the broker's license, started my team, had basically the FEIN number for Bradford Real Estate. We just had our 15-year anniversary because that FEIN number in 2008 is the same as today. But it was just Feltz. It was our team, and then it was Feltz, Jackson, and Wagner, which was my brother-in-law and Pat Wagner. So Pat is still with me. My brother-in-law's not. So then I bought the property on Bradford Avenue, had never taken outside agents, and decided if I could had someone that wanted to broker it, and I needed a generic name. So when we bought it on Bradford, I was like, I love that name.
Yeah.
And then we have a tree as our logo.
Yeah.
That is a bonsai juniper tree, which is known for strong roots. And since I'm from here, that's kind of where we came up with that.
That's right.
And I'm obsessed with Karate Kid. So bonsai trees have always been like a big thing in our house. So, but yeah, and that's it. And so now we've, we every year have grown. We started in like 2017, I guess, taking outside agents, and we probably have 170-ish now.
Wow,
So, yeah.
that's great. I think I might have met your firm, your previous broker, around that time. And I think it was like 35. So that's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So looking at homeowners today, whether it's a seller or a buyer, you can take either one you want to start with. What are they feeling right now? I mean, we've talked about 40-year inflation. We've talked about if you're a seller, you might have a 2.99% rate, and now you're looking in the sixes. Kind of just take it from there, because you guys are, I mean, we're on the lending side, but everyone calls because they want the house first. And so you're the one that hear the excitement, or you hear the hesitation of why they want to sit on the fence, why they don't want to list, why they don't want to buy. So kind of share with our listeners a little bit from your experience of what you're seeing in the market right now from where it was a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to list your home, first of all, we're just blessed to be in Middle Tennessee, and it is still a very strong market. I think with the conversations we're having to have is just kind of getting back to the expectation of what a normal market looks like. So I say that to say a seller can get really frustrated by their home being on the market for 90 days. That's very normal, right? That's very normal. And so if you price it correctly, it's still going to sell. Now, you may have to show it more than you used to. Now, under 500, we're still having a lot of multiple offers. So if you're a buyer, get pre-approved and get an offer, and because it's tough. It's still tough. But if you're a seller, I mean, as long as you understand that this is going to be probably a 30 to 150 day process, that's a very normal, it used to be an average. It probably used to always take us 100 days to sell a house back in 2006 and 7 and 8. And so,
Yeah. I remember years ago when I was doing my radio show, this was coming out of, the bubble, like probably around 2009, 2010. We had a marketing promo that we did. And at the time, I was in relationship with another real estate firm at the time. And we were like, our biggest thing was sold 90 days or less. Call us. We can get it sold 90 days or less. And so that's so opposite of where we are today, because they're like, 90 days is too long. And,
right. Yeah.
So true.
So true. And the other part of that is when you, but it's really on the real estate broker to set that expectation, right? I mean, and because ultimately, one of the things we see a lot is a coworker that lists their house for $350 and gets 10 offers the first weekend.
Yeah.
Versus someone who lists their house for $2 million, and that coworker's like, "Well, dude, I got 10 offers on my house," and he's like, "Only that." The $1 million seller's like, "Well, I've only had two showings in the first 3 weeks." Then they think it's their agent's issue, and it's not the agent. A lot of times there's each price range is a little different market. And so that is something that we didn't really see 2 years ago. It was every price point. So
that brings up a good point. And that's where I want to take a fourth segment, and where Kim was wanting to take ending our show is sometimes it is the agent, because we just came from a market to where literally all you had to do was put it on MLS and you started having multiple offers. So I know from you going, when I first met your firm years ago and growing as many agents as you have today, leadership is really important. And I think in today's environment, it's more important than ever to make sure you interview your agent well and have a good experienced agent, because this market's totally different. And I know a lot of loan officers have left this industry in the last 6 to 8 months. I'm sure real estate agents have. So I think it goes back to when a seller is frustrated because his home's not been shown 90 days. Yes, we are in a new market, but also, do they have the right real estate agent? So I'd like to get your take on that and how you lead your agents and train your agents. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you so much for listening to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show. Welcome back. I just want to say thank you to all of our loyal listeners. It's so interesting. Sometimes I'll get phone calls and say, I've been listening to your show for 10 years. And so thank you so much. I mean, my heart to start the show years ago, almost 18 years ago, was just to be an educational platform to help people and provide information information because, as a local team, sometimes that's better than just Googling on the internet. So everyone's financial DNA is different. If you would like to find out your purchasing power, please give us a call, 615-300-0794. Happy to have my co-host with me, Kim Hollingshead with Hollingshead & Associates, and we have Kyle Felton with Bradford Real Estate Group. We've had a pretty action-packed show today. We've talked about changes in Metro Nashville. We've talked about changes in the market and the shift. And coming into this segment, Kyle, I really, have admired what you have shared with us with your firm. I think I met your when you guys first opened, probably 2017 through 2018, maybe 30, 35 agents, and now it's over 130 agents. And we were talking about sellers, if you're just now tuning in, that are like, if they list their home, they're challenged with if they don't get a showing within the first 30 days, or if it's on the market for 90 days. I think it boils down to, in this market, in my opinion, you're the expert on your side. I mean, I just do the financing. I loan the money. I would think I would be the favorite person because I loan the money, but really it's the real estate agent, and then Kim gets to do the celebratory, keys. But
That's right.
I've always been confused of why the money's not the first priority, but it's not. They fall in love with the house first, and then they navigate to find the money. So, but one of the things I wanted us to kind of focus on is because, in this market, compared to a year ago, a lot of real estate agents were in the market and doing very, very well, selling a lot of homes. All you pretty much had to do was put it in the MLS. We had a lot of demand, interest rates, 2.75, some cases 2.5% on a 30-year fix, depending on the credit score. It was unbelievable. Yeah. This market shifted really hard, going into first quarter of last year. Really, we felt it more, or I did on the loan side, second quarter of last year. And we're continuing to see changes and shift in the market. And so the mindset of sellers, maybe we are back to a normal market, but being back to a normal market, in my opinion, means you've got to have a really good real estate agent that knows how to navigate this market. So from taking your firm from, 30 something agents to 130, still owning 8 companies, that just shows the strength of a leader that you are. And I would like for our listeners to know the difference in that, and how do they find a good agent to be able to represent them and give them the right advice? Because I know a lot of times they'll just go, well, my friend sold, my friend, a friend of a friend, or, that in this market, I feel like even last year we talked about all the multiple bids. Like, you had to have a good agent to negotiate on your behalf, right? To maybe win the bid. Well, in this particular case, you've got to have a good agent that's going to navigate you to market your home correctly and to be able to price it correctly, to be able to sell it, but also set the right expectation that we're not you put it on one day and you get multiple bids, right?
Sure.
So Kim had a great idea in ending up our show today about your leadership style and how you manage that and how you delegate that. And just for our listeners, what does that look like for them?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think I'm not good at much, but one thing I am good at is knowing what I am not good at. And so I love big ideas, and I love to sell, and I love to be around people. But a great example is years ago, we're in the Nations. I'm with a builder friend of mine, and we cut a deal on a guy's front porch by a handshake that we were going to tear his house down, build him a house for free. And the 3 adjoining lots that he owned, we'd build houses on it. So when you call an attorney and say, here's what I have, you call Kim and you say, here's what I've just agreed to. Now, how do we turn this into something in writing? So very big picture, right? So my business partner is CPA, so knowing exactly what you're good at and what you're not. And just a lot of times leadership is it's hard because you have to admit that to yourself. I used to think I was the best person at looking at a P&L. And then I listened to someone who was a lot better than me. And that's, what I mean? It's just, that's how it goes. So, but what I do, as far as we had talked about being positive, and it is a harder time to be positive when the market is not just booming like it was for 2 years. But I wrote this down because was talking to someone about it the other day, and I think one of the things we talk about is, if every day you can give out a compliment, find someone to help, find someone to give something to, and do a daily devotional. And I think that keeps your priorities in line, and I think that allows it allows you to stay positive. And so we practice that along with the greatness tracker and all the things that we all know help. But activity breeds activity, right? So if you can stay positive and you can still do the things that you know will help you earn people's trust in their business, then I think sometimes you have to get outside of your business mode to stay positive. And that's where the devotional and finding someone to help and compliment and give, I mean, that's the key.
Yeah,
So,
that is so true.
So if I'm out there and I'm going, okay, I'm listening to this show right now. I think I want to sell my home. How do they know? How do they know to find that right agent?
yeah. So, so I'm very big on, I sold one way when I was younger, and now that I have a team, I sell a different way. Right. So if the track record is the key, that's, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that you have to get someone that lives in your specific area. Now, a good agent knows their limits. Like what do I not? For us personally, at this point, we have friends in Murfreesboro that we would refer to. But when you start within like a 20-mile radius of Nashville, 25, I mean, we know it as good as anybody. So from that standpoint, it is a track record thing. And I know a lot of people are good promoters, but we have enough data now to know, do they actually create transactions, right?
Right.
The data is out there. So like, even if you have a great, you're a great promoter, but if you only sell a couple a year as a home seller, I'm going to have to look at that and say, well, okay, they're a good self-promoter, but do they create transactions? And do they?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And a lot of buyers and sellers are looking for a real estate agent who has a massive social media presence, right?
Yeah, sure.
But there's a difference between being great on social media and posting 15 times a day versus actually selling real estate online, right?
yeah, and honestly, some of the people, what they have done on social media is super impressive. It really is. And so, you can do both, right? You can be a great closing attorney, a great lender, a great agent, and have a great social media.
Yep.
'Cause y'all do it. So, I mean, you can do both. It's just, it's sometimes it's better to do a little bit more research just to make sure that leads to actual closed transactions.
Agreed.
Yep.
So kind of to wrap that up for our show today, if I'm a seller or a buyer in my interview process, I'm going to find out your experience. I'm going to ask you how many families you helped last year, how many families you've helped this year, any other advice that you would ask.
I would, everyone has a price in their head, right? As a seller, I would not tell that agent the price that they think. They should let the agent tell them first.
Great
Gotcha.
tip.
Let that be part of your process, because inevitably, if you say, I really want 1.5 for my house, they may have came in and were going to deliver that 1.35 was the proper list price. But well, now everything's changed.
Yeah.
And they may be like, well, to get the listing, I may need to. So let them tell you the price first.
That's
Great.
good advice. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in this week. Thank you, Kim, for coming in as co-hosting, as always, on Saturday. Kim Hollingshead with Hollingshead and Associate. Also, Kyle Feltz with Bradford Real Estate Group. Thank you for coming in and giving us some great advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Not only from the standpoint of how to interview an agent, but also how important this election is going to be. And then just hearing that, the story of how you came up with your company name and just being the root, the tree. Love it. And yeah, so really appreciate you taking your time. I know your time is very valuable. So thank you again for tuning in, and have a blessed week, and be sure and tune in next week to the Tonya Esquibel Real Estate Show every Saturday from noon to 1 right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.